When it comes to technology, are you fed up with hype and buzzwords? If you're looking for a tech podcast where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses, reshaping entire industries, and even our world, you've come to the right place. Whether outlandish or reasonable, consumers want intuitive, tech-enabled experiences in the here and now. And yes, I think we all get a little bit carried away wondering what's going to be possible in 2030 or even 2050. But how much of what is readily available for us to currently use could turn vision into reality? Now, on this podcast, I enjoy exploring how these expectations are transforming areas that you don't associate with technology. And a great example of this is car parks. I mean, it's not uncommon, to pay for your car parking space using a smartphone app now. But today's guest takes that a step further and believes that today's cars do a lot more than just getting you from A to B, because integrated tech experiences are revolutionizing travel on our roads by making transport greener, smarter, and essentially turning our cars into smartphones on wheels. So today's guest is Peter O'Driscoll from RingGo, the cashless parking solution, and the biggest one in the UK here. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK, where you can join me and Peter in conversation. So a massive welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, hi, my name's Peter O'Driscoll and I'm the Managing Director for RingGo in the UK. I've worked for the business now for just over 13 or 14 years, and I've been with it very much from the start of the arrival of smartphone parking in the UK.
And if I was to take you back beyond that 14 years, before RingGo, before smartphones were even a thing, can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or a moment that put you on this path?
I can, yeah. So what kind of put me on this path is I used to work at National Car Park before I worked for RingGo. And we were looking at trying to simplify the user journey. And back in those days, car parks consisted of a man in a booth taking literally a bucket of cash or a till. You couldn't use a credit card in many terminals, and you had pay and display options. So you're looking at kind of three different kind of access types. One being, barrier, pull a ticket, or pay a man in a box. And I'd come prior to that from a leasing background where I spent 5 or 6 years working for Lease Plan. And I was brought into NCP to, in effect, bring the fleet business into their organisation. And we didn't have the right technical solution in place. In fact, there was a solution in place. So back then I had this kind of brainwave that actually what did everyone have in their wallet at that point in time? And I'm going back now probably 18 to 20 years. They had a credit card or debit card in their wallet. So we set about looking about how do we actually simplify the user experience by mag striping access control into car parks. Which required us at the time to do a big upgrade on the parking equipment so we could take credit card payments or debit card payments. And from that, we were then able to put into the marketplace a white label solution for fleet users. And that was about 18, 20 years ago, as I said. That kind of really got my brain thinking. This still isn't a smart way of doing things. And you've got to remember, back then, the iPhone hadn't been invented. Blackberries were just about to come out of the production units, shall we say, and everyone's using Nokias. And so the idea of phone parking hadn't really kind of come to fore. And then I bumped into something when I was trying to pay for parking with this thing called an IVR, which is an integrated voice recognition system, where in effect you touch keypads to input your duration, etc. I thought, there's something in this here. And at the time, there weren't many companies doing it. And I was approached by one of the organisations in the marketplace who eventually acquired RingGo. And I found myself in phone parking, and it was really the driver for me was how do you make life simple? And I could just see a future where at some point, a computer would be on your phone. I don't know why I had that kind of thought in my head, but certainly going through education, going through schooling. When we went to school, it was when you got a job, you got a team PA that typed up your notes, for example. And then it went to a computer. I thought, hang on a minute, this computer's going to get much bigger than it is today. So I wouldn't say I had the foresight to say to Steve Jobs, go do an iPhone. Not at all, but certainly I could see that the world was going to change, and cash in particular was going to be a commodity that would reduce. And we've seen that play out in today's retail space and marketplace.
What a great story. And I clearly remember those days where there was a rotund guy, shall we say, sat there with a big bucket of coins and cash. And I'd love how those experiences led you to RingGo, which is the UK's #1 parking app. And I'm conscious we will have people listening all around the world. So you can tell me a little bit more about the story behind RingGo and the problems that set out to solve with technology too.
Yeah, sure. The world of phone parking arrived in the UK back in 2004 in the London Borough of Wandsworth. What was at the time a 2-month trial in Putney, just before I started working for the organisation, and that was by a company called Park Mobile. Park Mobile acquired RingGo in 2012, and at the time then that there was probably 5 players in the marketplace, and that made RingGo and Park Mobile #1 in the UK. We then really set out on a journey to, land grab or seize the market. And so we were very effective with our technology, very effective in our sales process, and we were able to grow the business to where it is today to roughly us covering about 65% of the market of local authority parking today. Some of the challenges we encountered on the way, I think really it was the transition. If you look how phone parking started, and indeed enforcement, you've got to look at the whole ecosystem as not just being purely paying for parking. It's how does a traffic warden then make sure that they're enforcing that parking session, and that someone's paid to park. And back in the old days, for want of a better word, the traffic warden had a handheld, and they'd see if they'd pay a display ticket in the window screen. If there wasn't, they issued a parking ticket. You bring in digital payments, that world changes. Now, back then, GPS phones weren't that commonplace and certainly weren't in the hands of traffic wardens. And many people didn't have a mobile phone. So the question was, well, we can work out how you actually buy a parking session and build a solution for that. But then how do we get the local authorities or private car park operators to enforce that session so they can see the person has paid? So to overcome that first challenge, we issued what's called RFID cards in the marketplace. So if you were to become a phone parking customer, we issued you with a RFID card, which you stuck in your windscreen. The traffic warden would then know to scan the RFID card. And if the RFID card was valid, you could then, in effect, continue to park and not get a parking ticket. So the first real challenge wasn't around taking the payment. It was actually how do you enforce the session. Then we had other challenges around number plate recognition. You try saying your number plate into an IVR with different regional accents. That's a challenge in itself. So we had to, in effect, train our IVR tooling or automated tooling to actually recognize different accents and, in effect, develop a degree of accuracy. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges. And I think one of the hurdles to adoption, because people got tired or found the registration process quite cumbersome. So I think we kind of reached a natural point of early adopters. And it wasn't really until the advent of the smartphone where we really saw usage and take up grow, because you had that whole barrier removed and became so simple on a smartphone to input your vehicle details.
I love that. And one of the reasons I record this podcast every day is to get stories like this out there and explore areas that people just don't associate with technology. And car parking, I suspect, is one of those. But many of the new solutions like RingGo, it makes the whole experience almost seamless. And it gets me thinking, despite the acceleration of tech developments, it often seems like consumer expectations are now outpacing most industries. And there's a great quote that the last experiences anyone has anywhere becomes that standard expectation they want everywhere. And you just think of going into that car park and you're paying seamlessly using a smartphone app, you kind of expect that experience everywhere. So are you finding that your customers want intuitive tech-enabled experiences in the here and now? And if that is the new expectation, how can other businesses keep up?
So I think the expectation of consumers is it has to be hassle-free. It has to be a forgettable experience.
Yeah.
If it becomes a memorable experience, it usually means that something hasn't worked. It's a bit like when you take a holiday. You never really remember the flight unless there was, say, a screaming child on board. You always remember, got to the airport, went on holiday, and you talk about the resort. You don't talk about the flight from A to B.
Yeah.
You have a bad flight, you remember it. And that story will come up year after year, or something comical happens on a flight, you'll remember it. Or if there's a health incident on a flight, you'll remember it. And phone parking's the same. We're fortunate that RingGo has been really successful in the marketplace. Our app store ratings are very high. And I think, a couple of times we've actually beaten the likes of Uber in downloads in terms of the travel category. So it kind of shows you the size and scale of our organisation. But I think, for me, the user experience is key. And what do users expect from us today? They don't expect to have any interaction apart from entering their number plate and the location code. And what we've seen recently with the advent, is probably a technical term, PSD2 or third-party factor authentication. What that basically means today is when you pay for a good or service via an online channel, you have to, in effect, do a two-factor authentication. So you might get text sent to you, enter in a code number or go to your banking app. Now, in my case, that's kind of caused potentially significant disruption to the user flow and journey for buying a parking session. However, we've been able to overcome that by looking at how we integrate with that particular requirement and deal with that. So that's meant that for our phone parking platform, certainly for RingGo, we've been able to make that a smoothest transition for our users. I know our competitors struggled, but we're able to get that in place and develop the right lookups and key API contact points with third parties to make that happen seamlessly.
And I also read that you're seeing great strides in integrated IoT in the automotive industry. So can I ask you share some of your observations and insights around that too?
Yeah. So if we talk about the future of phone parking in kind of the integration points as well, I touched upon earlier the fact that, we moved from this world of RFID cards for enforcement, that we also had, key press to put number plate into a smartphone. So where's the next big jump? It will be in car. And why do I say that? I say that because cars at the moment are predominantly petrol, diesel. They're moving to electric vehicle charging. So at some point, you're going to want to park and charge in the same transaction. So either do it on a smartphone device, you're doing it in car. And that's when I think we'll see things start to integrate a lot more deeper. At the moment, we have integrations with BMW in the head unit. It's proprietary in their dashboard itself. We have integrations with JLR out there in the market in the UK. On the continent, where we have other brands, but we're owned by the Easy Park Group, we have integrations with Polestar, which is an intuitive app integration. It's one of their first things they did as part of the new rollout of the Polestar in terms of in-car services. So I think longer term, it will gather momentum. But right now, it's probably just starting that journey, much like the smartphone journey began. If I look at my business 8 years ago, 90% was on a phone channel. Today, the figure is 12% is on a phone channel and decreasing.
And before you came on the podcast, I was also reading about the National Parking Platform's first open market rollout in Manchester. But this just got me thinking, because this is a little bit outside my world. So what is open market technology and how is it going to impact motorists?
Sure. At the moment, the biggest complaint I get is the fact I can't use RingGo all across the UK.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many phone parking apps you have on your phone, but I certainly have 4 on mine. To drive around the UK. And the biggest frustration for users, they don't always have that second or third supplier on their phone, and they want a ubiquitous service. So to do that, you need to move away from the current procurement construct. So right now, we have to bid for our contracts through local procurement with governments or local government procurement. Those cycles tend to last 3 to 4 years per contract, plus some extensions sometimes. Then it goes back out to marketplace again. And then what happens is there's a potential change of vendor. However, what we've seen is through that tender process that the vendors are quite sticky. So you don't really get that kind of ongoing expansion. And then for users, they haven't got ubiquitous coverage. So by having an open market, we're in effect saying, today, if you go into a shop, you imagine a shop saying you can only use a Visa and you're a MasterCard holder. Yeah. So already today in the world of retail payments or online payments, it's an open market for card issuers. So we want to do the same thing for phone parking. So that if you've got my app, my competitor's app, you can park in the same location. And we're in effect competing at the same parking bay or location or car park for that user, which means the model changes from being a model where we're focused on, shall we say, meeting the requirements of the council, which we'll still do, to fighting for the consumer. And that in itself will drive innovation in the marketplace, because if you've got a bad user experience, but you can park with the different providers in the same location, you'll vote with your feet. Same as Amazon, Netflix, and those online TV channels. It's really bringing that kind of open market approach to the UK. The open market, however, has been in place for over 20 years now on the continent. So if you go to the Netherlands, that's how they started the business model. You go to Norway, Finland, large parts of Sweden, Denmark, parts of Germany. They've had open market in place for many, many years. And for them, the concept that you can't use your go-to product when you're going to park your vehicle is completely alien. So the UK is somewhat behind in that kind of journey in getting there to an open market model.
It's such a good idea. Nobody wants 4 or 5 car parking apps on their phone, do they? And like I say, it improves that experience. And before you came on the podcast, I also read a great quote by you, and it was your belief that the car is actually a smartphone on wheels that do much more than just get you from A to B. So on that point, can you tell me more about how integrated tech experiences are actually revolutionizing travel on our roads?
Yeah, let me give you an example, okay? It's from within Europe, where what we've done, we've actually integrated to the car for paying for parking. And what it does, it will navigate to a parking space. So the car is in effect your navigation tool, or it's a smartphone navigating to where you need to be. Then when you arrive at a parking bay, it says, do you want to park your vehicle? And you just say yes, or you push a button.
Yeah.
Then when you drive away, it notices that you're going at more than, say, 12 kilometers per hour. And it says, do you wish to stop your parking? That's a trial we have running in Europe at the moment. And that works quite well. And we're seeing quite a lot of positive feedback from that particular initiative that we're running. But again, I touched upon earlier about EV payments or EV charging. You know, your smartphone or your tablet in your car will in effect navigate to a charge point, undertake the charge and bill your account for you. If you look at some of the vehicle manufacturers and some of the arms they have there in their divisions, they're kind of evolving those concepts. Booking a hotel, you know, or traveling somewhere, concierge service, they're all products and services that are available, some of the premium brands today. And it's really, how does that get incorporated into the vehicle, you know, to make your vehicle more smart? And, you know, if you're charging a Tesla, you sit there and you watch YouTube or watch a movie, you know, you listen to Spotify.
Mm.
So you can see where I'm coming from about your car being a smartphone, you know, on wheels.
You've talked today about a lot of the things that you're seeing here in the UK and also right across Europe and how the two compare. And as someone that's fully immersed in this industry, what tech trends excite you in this space at the moment?
There's a few, really. I think for me, it's what you can do with the data. You know, we process approximately in the UK about 35% of all parking income. Now, armed with that information, we can overlay that into some occupancies data. And there's vehicles out there today that are doing scanning. So we offer a scanning service for local authorities where we have, in effect, cameras mounted to vehicles going around capturing space availability and occupancy on street. You overlay that with parking data. You can start to see some really interesting trends and patterns. So you want to improve, shall we say, the air quality or the traffic flow through a city. We can really help that understanding. We have the data points, both today and historically. So for me, one exciting thing that could come out from, you know, this digitalization is really using data, you know, to make decisions. At the moment, you know, local authorities are using, you know, not in every case, but certainly historically, you know, tick back sheets or people walking the streets to determine what's going on, and they're paying people a fortune to do that. Whereas with the information that we have, we can give real accurate data. And if you want to make effect or make a change, there are things like emission-based parking you can introduce, where you might say, well, actually, we're going to disincentivize certain vehicle types or fuel types from coming into a city because we know that in a particular area, we've got a problem with pollution and we can see that there's loads of diesel vans parking up. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the parking policy, which will mean that as fleets refresh their vehicles, they move to cleaner fuels or electric, by way of example.
Incredibly cool. And a question I've got to ask on behalf of all RingGo users out there, what's next for RingGo? What can we expect and where do you go from here?
Yeah, I think where do we go from here? It's park and charge. So we have a product working in Europe. It's deployed in Norway with our parent company. And our plan is to bring that to the UK. And that will in effect allow you to pay for your parking and charging in one transaction. I think, you know, that scaling will probably take some time just because of the nature of where the EV charge point operator space is, which is quite fragmented at the moment because it's still very much a growing industry. But I see that as being one of the next big things for RingGo that we'll be doing, and potentially, who knows, looking at tolling in the future.
Watch this space. So it sounds like we'll have to get you back on next year, see how that journey's going. Well, a big thank you for joining me and spending your time today, sharing your insights and experiences. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave one more thing before you go. And that is there a book that has inspired you, important to you, or anything at all that we can add to our Amazon wish list for listeners to check out. What are you going to leave us with today?
Well, what's interesting, I think, is the book I'm going to leave you with is probably, it's not a book of management. It's not a book about business. It's a historical book based on fact. I think they possibly did a documentary on this, I think, on the BBC. But the book is called Storm from the East.
Yeah.
And it's by Robert Marshall, I think, if my memory serves. And it's about Genghis Khan to Kublai Khan. And the book is about the rise of the Mongol Empire and how it spread across Europe and also into China. And what's interesting about the book for me, and the reason I remember it, and I read the book many years ago, is it taught me several things to think about. And that is, you don't know what's around the corner. No one expected a nomadic tribe to come out and conquer a large part of Asia and almost a third of Europe and large parts of Russia. So in business, you never know who your new competitor is going to be. It also kind of showed to me the importance of having the right leadership structure in place, but also not just at the very top of the chain, but also the army or the people who support you around that. Running a business is a bit like running, I wouldn't profess to be a military professional, but certainly running a well-disciplined army unit. If the leader gets knocked out, you need your subs bench or your management team to kick into play. But also while you're running an organization or running an empire, you need a good structure around you. And it documents how that happens and then how it collapses. And I think you can see some parallels there in industry where you look at the way some businesses really succeed and then they collapse and others keep going. So for me, I think Storm from the East is a good read. And from a historical perspective, not many people know too much about, Asians coming into Europe. Most history we know is about the Europeans conquering the rest of the world and colonizing. But there were people before and after us that have done that. And we don't often think about, that part of the world coming to play as an imperial force or certainly a global force.
What a great point. And I'll be adding that book to the Amazon wish list for other people to check out. And I'd love to hear more about what people think and a lot of the points you raise there and the parallels. Fantastic stuff. But before I let you go, for anyone listening just wanting to find out more information about RingGo, maybe keep up to speed with the technical developments and the things you're working on, what's the best starting point for everything?
I would say the best place to go is the App Store. Download the app today. And then you'll get every app update that comes through as part of the iOS upgrade, so or the Google Play Store. So I would go to those two places in the first instance, and there's some great stuff on there if you're a consumer in terms of tutorials, how to use a product. And there's also web chat, live chat when asking any questions around your interaction with us as a user. And for general media, and press inquiries, it'd probably be our ringo.co.uk website. But if I'm frank, most of our users and shall we say, encounter with the public is via the app. So that would be my recommendation.
Awesome. Well, I'll have those links so people can find that nice and easily. But more than anything, just a big thank you for coming on today. I think we're both from a time where we remember those guys that sat there with the buckets of cash and coins and to go from there to just seamlessly paying from a smartphone app is amazing. But then now we're looking at the customer experience demands of the customers of tomorrow, and they have bigger and bolder expectations, and it's how that evolves. And as you said, the car's turning into a smartphone on wheels. So it's interesting where it's all going to lead. But a big thank you, Peter, for sharing that with me today.
You're welcome, and thank you for your time today.
Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I absolutely loved hearing that entire journey from the guy sat there collecting cash in buckets to now just paying for our car parking space using a smartphone app. Where's this taking us to? And this is just one example of one of those mundane tasks in life that's been transformed by technology. But you don't think about it because it's seamless and it just happens. You just hit it on your phone and it all goes away. So it was also great hearing about the technology that makes all that possible. But as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or visit my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, if you need any help with business blogs or launching your own podcast, or just want to have a look at 2,000 interviews. But keep your questions and comments coming in. So I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.